Good afternoon to everyone who's joined us for this event, another event for LSBU's International Women's Day 2021 activity. And today we are choosing to challenge violence against women and girls. This event's been in place for around a month or so. LSBU are passionately committed to continuing to choose to challenge violence against women and girls, but today's event seems even more poignant given the recent news that we've all kind of been listening to and paying attention to. My name is Neil Hudson-Basing. I'm LSBU's Corporate Events Manager. I'm delighted to be working with Chris and Tirion again. And I've just got a short webinar statement to read for you before I go through the housekeeping. Everyone speaking at or attending an LSBU event, whether in person or virtually, should be treated with respect, dignity, and courtesy. LSBU operates an environment built on equality, inclusion, and acceptance. We value contributions, feedback, and comments, and wish to create a space for sharing, learning, celebrating, and bringing communities together. LSBU does not tolerate any form of abuse, bullying, harassment, or discrimination. Inappropriate behaviour, including that potentially impacts or contradicts LSBU's reputation and values, will be treated seriously and acted upon. Anyone exhibiting any example of this behaviour will also be removed from the webinar. We want our events to be an enjoyable and warm experience for all. Thank you for adhering to these guidelines. So just to take you through the virtual housekeeping, this is Zoom Pro, so you are welcome to turn your cameras on if you'd like to. You can also turn your microphones on when it comes time for Q&A. It is great to see people making use of the chat box already. Please continue to do so and let us know who you are, what you do, and where you're joining from. It's lovely to know who's in our audience, and it helps us to break down the virtual walls that we're all facing at the moment. This was an informal session. It's more kind of like a chance to kind of find out more about what Chris and Tirion have been working on, and a chance to reflect and look to the future to see what we have coming up. But this is also an opportunity for sharing ideas and providing an open forum, something that's incredibly important at the moment when we think about this issue. After the conversation, you'll be invited to ask questions and be involved in the conversation. So please do, if you have a question, please either use the raise your hand function or simply turn your mic on and signal to me that you'd like to ask one, and I'll come over to you and then you're free to ask your question. That's all from me in terms of housekeeping. I'd now like to kind of ask our two guest speakers, my wonderful colleagues, Chris and Tirion, to introduce themselves. So I obviously know who you both are, but could you please introduce yourselves for those that may not know you, and tell us who you are, what you do, and why you do it. And Chris, we'll start with you.
Okay, thanks ever so much, Neil. My name's Chris Magill, and I'm a senior lecturer in criminology in the School of Law and Social Sciences at LSBU. I'm also the lead for the Crime and Justice Research Group. My interest in this area, violence against women and girls, goes way back to when I was initially involved in a Home Office crime reduction project as a researcher. And one of the projects focused on domestic abuse and working with an organisation in London around addressing domestic abuse. And that's where my interest in this area comes from, and I'm committed to ending all forms of violence against women and girls. Thank you. And Tirion?
Hello, I'm Tirion Havard. I'm a senior lecturer in the social work department at South Bank University. I suppose my interest with domestic abuse started when I was a trainee probation officer stroke social worker, and I was on placement and sort of met my first perpetrator really, and then spent much of my professional career supervising perpetrators and assessing perpetrators of domestic abuse. I'm co-lead of the serious youth serious violence research cluster in the School of Health and Social Care, and I'm doing lots of different bits of research in an effort to try and reduce violence against women and girls and challenge that on sort of subtle and less subtle experiences.
Thank you. So to start with, we're going to talk about research. So, you know, could you tell us a little bit more about the research groups that you're both affiliated with, some of the work that's been done, some of the work that's taken place, and some of the internal colleagues you work with across LSBU in that research, because it's very much a collaborative approach to this.
Shall I go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, so I can talk a little bit about the Crime and Justice Research Group, which, as I say, sits within the School of Law and Social Science. It's very much a multidisciplinary group comprised of colleagues that are part of the criminology team, but also it cuts across uni, and we have representation from other schools within the university. And I see, I think some of our members are here today, actually. So what do we do? Well, as a research group, we're interested in working collaboratively around issues to do with criminal justice, particularly working with marginalised and criminalised groups. But within that, there's a few of us who are interested in addressing violence against women and girls. Tirion's a member of our group, and it was through the Crime and Justice Research Group that we both initially connected and realised we had these shared interests around that particular interest. And Tirion and I have worked collaboratively through the group for the last, well, few years really. Tirion, I'll hand it over to you to take over.
You look like you fell at your chair then. Sorry.
Yeah, I hit my laptop like that. There you go.
Yeah, so I'm also part of the Crime and Justice Research Group, or sort of a guest rather than a leader, and also co-chair the Serious Violence Cluster with Andrew Whitaker in the School of Health and Social Care. So that's obviously quite a lot around gangs and stuff, and sort of the reason it's co-chaired really is because I sort of put women and girls centre stage. So I look very much more around the experiences of women and girls in gangs, and Andrew looks more holistically at gangs, and then we work together to try to inform people, do some research, do evaluations, all that sort of thing. Chris and I are both members of the Race, Gender and Sexualities group, and I want to say that Chris is going to be doing a very interesting talk about Twitter abuse very shortly, so everybody should go to that. And I think sort of there's lots of changes in the research groups. I think that there's lots of different research groups are changing because schools are changing, and that's a really interesting time because it'll be really interesting to see how that comes out. But certainly I'd like to see violence against women and girls very much part of the discussion for any changes that may or may not occur.
Thank you. It's amazing how much collaboration goes on in kind of what you do, and I know that I really enjoy collaborating with you on the events that we've done, and I just wondered, you know, if you could talk about those events, you know, the ones that we've had recently. So they've all been really well received, really well attended, and people have taken a lot from them. The engagement's been phenomenal. Are you okay to tell us a little bit more, tell our audience today a little bit more about those events? So Tirion, we'll start with you talking about the event that we held in December 2019. And that was the first one that we'd worked on. And that event was entitled Coercive Control, Contextualizing the Invisible. Tell us a bit more about that, Tirion.
Yeah, so that was really exciting. That was almost like a test run, really, wasn't it? So it was the first collaborative thing that Chris and I did as representatives of School of Health and Social Care and Law and Social Sciences. So that was a bit of a test, really. And it was a bit, I was nervous anyway, I'd say. But yes, we wanted to talk about coercive control because that wasn't quite as much in the limelight as it is at the moment, I would say. And I wanted to be part, my PhD was about coercive control. And so I really wanted to sort of centre stage that much more. And we did that face to face. So that was, that seems like a long time ago.
So it does, it seems like a different world.
Yes, I know. And that was really good. I really enjoyed that because, you know, we had Sophie Linden, she opened it. And so that sort of gave us a real sort of presence in terms of the significance that statutory organisations were placing on violence against women and girls. And then we also had Marcella, who was a survivor of domestic abuse, and who spoke very passionately and very eloquently about her experiences of abuse. And then, you know, we had Lindsay from UK Says No More, and then I talked a bit about sort of my research, and I thought it went really, really well. And we got really good face-to-face attendance. I remember being quite surprised at that. I think there were like 2 empty seats, I seem to remember counting. It was easier to count the empty seats than it was to count the full one, which is always a good sign, I think.
It was. And when you kind of like you said that kind of back when we did that, it does seem like a lifetime ago, coercive control wasn't as much in the limelight now. In this new world, what's the change?
Well, I think the domestic abuse bill is, and I've got to mention Rhiannon Lewis actually, because she talked about it, didn't she? So so the domestic abuse bill is very much you know, it's in Parliament today, I think, for one of its many readings. And so, you know, coercive control is at the heart of that bill. And I think everybody's much more aware of it. I mean, it's been in legislation for a while, but I think because there's this bill that is specific to domestic abuse, it's much more centre stage. And also what I'm doing with that, because there's an increased awareness, I'm also now pushing in various avenues to get coercive control recognised within gangs, and particularly the experiences of girls and young women in gangs, and that we should really understand what they're going through a coercive control lens, rather than criminalise them and see them as drug pushers or sex offenders or whatever. That really, I believe that if we understand what boys as well, but obviously my gender is women and girls, are experiencing in gangs, and we understand that through the coercive control lens, I think we can be much more compassionate, we can be strengths-based, and we can meet their needs much more readily. So I'm doing quite a lot of that at the moment with different organisations.
Thank you. And Chris, moving on to the event that we held September last year, we moved virtually, and the event was Stay Home, Save Lives, Dangerous Times for Domestic Abuse Survivors. Are you okay to talk us through that?
Yeah, sure. I was just reflecting a little bit on, before I do that, I was just thinking a little bit about the coercive control contextualizing conference that we did, the first one we did, Tirion. Because it was a moment, you know, there was something about that event that you said we were trialing it, you know, we were but it was far beyond more than I thought it was going to be when it actually happened. We captured a particular moment in time, and we created a space that was so supportive, with Marcella speaking about her experiences and the audience's reaction to that. And the lecture theatre was full, and we had so much positive feedback further to that event, and it's nice to dwell on that positive feedback and also think about what we did at that event in terms of raising awareness about coercive control. That was one of our aims, and I think we really succeeded in that. You know, with the audience, the people who attended, they sort of what we got on social media. And it's part of why we do what we do, isn't it? This sort of awareness raising agenda. So I just wanted to note that for a moment. But in a similar vein, the event we did last September on domestic abuse and COVID, it was a virtual, so it was a slightly different feel to it. But we still communicated a really important message to the people who attended around domestic abuse. And it was all the more important, I think, because at that point in time we had very much realized that actually government advice around stay home, stay safe wasn't the case for women and children living with domestic abuse, and that was why we did the event we did. And we were very fortunate. We had Alistair from Respect join us on that occasion to talk about that organisation Respect and the work they do with perpetrators. So it was a slightly different angle there. That was interesting. And also we were very lucky because we had Lindsay and Dear Love join us again from UK Says No More. And I think at that point, if I'm right, Tirion, they were beginning to talk about their safe spaces scheme.
Yeah, I think
a little bit the blur.
mentioned it in the coercive control one because they were doing it, if memory serves me right, because they'd already started doing it in Islington, I think, was there. That's where they were piloting it. And they mentioned that in the coercive control seminar that we did. And then I think, yes, it was full throttle with the safe spaces September because of the increased reporting, really.
Exactly. So it's really nice to give UK Says No More and Lindsay talking on their behalf a platform really to share that scheme that the organisation had rolled out. There was, was a moment in time again for that scheme to be a huge success, because it meant that people living with domestic abuse could seek support and be signposted to support via local chemists. So it was really nice to be able to give Lindsay that space and to work collaboratively with her and of course Tirion again for that event last September.
And what I also really liked about that event is that we had the perpetrator perspective and the survivor perspective, and sort of because it wasn't a violence against women and girls event, we felt better able to bring in the perpetrators and to recognize that domestic abuse is involves two parties. There's the abuser and the survivor, and I think it was really interesting to just bring those two things together and to see it as a whole. I quite like that we did that, actually. Yeah,
that more sort of holistic approach. Yeah, that was a good call. Yeah, it was good on that one.
I mean, it was a really, really fantastic event. You continue to work with lots of fantastic organisations, and that event really did give a platform to kind of like showcase lots of the initiatives, but lots of the work being done by a number of organisations. Could you tell us about some of the partnerships that you've kind of formed through doing this work, and why they're so vital to the work that you do? Tirion, if we come to you first.
Okay, so I think a shout out to the partnerships that we're doing within the university. So Chris and I are working with Andrew Whitaker from the Social Work Department and Denise Harvey from Social Work, Chris Flood, the Health Economist, Esmery Miller and Becky Shepherd from the Criminology Department. And we're working together as a group of people to try to do some research and to do some evaluations, and we're doing all of that. Then outside of that, the partnerships that Chris and I and some of the people I've mentioned already, we've just recently won a contract to evaluate IDVA services, so independent domestic violence advocates in hospitals in Surrey. We've built a lot in the UK. So my background, my PhD I did on coercive control and mobile phones, and I worked with Hestia, who were linked with UK Says No More, and it was Hestia that allowed me to go into the refuges. And so I feel that that's a really long partnership that's sort of developed and grown. And so I'm often talking to people in Hestia or talking to people in UK Says No More to do joint collaborations. I'm working with Southwark. Am I answering your question, Neil? Or am I going off on tangents?
No, okay. You're fine.
Okay, so and then Chris and I are also working to evaluate a serious youth violence intervention and prevention program in Kent. So that's sort of the gangs thing and how we can work with people who are entrenched in gang life or on the periphery of gang life, and how we can stop the general public. So we're doing that again with many of the members that I mentioned before. I'm working with Andrew with Southwark Council to try to look at a training course around coercive control and gangs. And I've just started working in Parliament. So I'm in Parliament 2 days a week. And I'm getting to know and very much like an organisation called SON, who is an organisation designed for African women who experience abuse, and I'm working with them to try to understand the cultural differences and the cultural differences that inform the domestic violence and how it's perpetrated, why it's allowed to happen, why it's seen as normal and acceptable, with a view to opening that up and maybe doing some research with them in the future.
Thank you. And Chris, some of your partnerships that you'd like to shine a light on?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll not mention the internal partnerships because Tirion's already mentioned those, but I think that illustrates the extent to which those partnerships, which cut across different research groups, which cut across different schools across the university, it shows how people, you know, rally around and collaborate around these really important issues. So I think that's a huge positive, really, to be taken away from this work. I'd like to mention a couple of external organisations, if I may, who've worked with both Tirion and I in putting together our events and so on and so forth. I'd like to mention RISE. RISE is an organisation that works to support people experiencing domestic abuse, that's based in Brighton and Hove, and that's where I live. So I've got that local connection, and I've been working with them for a few years now in relation to a scheme they run that's called Change That Lasts Ambassadors, and that's around arming the community around domestic abuse to respond effectively and properly and without putting anybody further at risk when domestic abuse is disclosed. So I've been working with RISE for quite some time, and RISE were fantastic when it came to our first event on coercive control, because they worked very closely with Tirion and I to give a voice to a survivor, Marcella, who Tirion's already mentioned, who travelled up to London from Brighton on that day and told her story in a very personal and poignant way, which really made a huge difference to that event. And that was the first time that Marcella told her story to anyone in a public arena. So it was a huge. We were hugely grateful and an honour, actually. It was an honour that Marcella chose our event to tell her story, harrowing though it was. And that was largely down to RISE, the organisation in Brighton here, who support women and children, and just to put a little bit of a political hat on here, anybody who follows RISE will know that they've had an issue with their contracts being not being renewed recently, and their work being handed over to national generic organisations. And yeah, that's a bit of an issue, and has been for quite some time. But it really brought it home to me when I saw RISE going through this. So that's one organisation. And the second organisation I'd like to mention is Sister Space. Again, they came and supported us. Rose Lewis from Sister Space came and spoke at one of our conferences, and she was fantastic. And for those who don't know, Sister Space are a London-based organisation, community-based, very grassroots, you know, specialist service, supporting women of African heritage who are living with domestic abuse or have lost someone through domestic abuse. A really, really important organisation, who they themselves have had some battles with Hackney Council recently around their premises, and anybody who follows them on social media will know all about that. And I just want to mention, actually, if I may, the Division of Social Sciences in the School of Law and Social Sciences, particularly the head of the division, Adrian Budd, who very kindly organised that the members of the division who agreed to it, and we all agreed to it, we donated our Christmas bonus, if that's what it's called. We put it together and donated our pot of money to Sister Space and to help with their campaign. And that was something that was instigated by a colleague. I said the wrong word, instigated. That was something that was suggested by a colleague, Jaya, and I got behind it, and I said, yes, we should pull together, help this organisation, Sister Space, and Adrian made it happen. So thank you, Adrian, for organising that and making the necessary arrangements. But yeah, great organisation, both great organisations.
Yeah, Sister Space are fantastic. They spoke at our sustainability event in January, where we were looking at the impact of COVID-19 on BAME communities. And Rose, it was really good to hear about how far they come between that event and now, and and kind of also just provide a platform for that ongoing struggle that they're facing to provide a service. I mean, all of these partnerships are fantastic. Why are they so vital to the work you do? And I know we talk lots about kind of like bridging that gap between academia and kind of like services. You know, why are they so vital to what you do to build up those sustainable, efficient working relationships?
Well, to put it very bluntly, those organisations save lives. That's what they do. That's absolutely what they do. There's no question about it. And to work collaboratively with an organisation to help in that endeavour, well, why wouldn't you, basically? So that's kind of where I'm coming from, Tirion.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't put it better myself, Christine. I think, but also I think the connection between academia and grassroots frontline organisations is also really important, because as academics we get time to reflect and sort of look at the bigger picture and see it within that, whereas very often frontline organisations are sort of firefighting and dealing with staff, and they may not recognise sometimes just what great work they're doing. And I think sometimes having people like academics coming in and saying, well, look, you know, particularly if it's valuations, but not necessarily actually, sometimes just sitting there and saying, like, I've just left a meeting, literally 10 minutes before this started, left a meeting and so on. And it was so lovely to see this virtual space where all these women were sharing their experiences of abuse, but just being very open, and just providing that safe space, I think is incredible, really. And so many organizations have used the pandemic and the lockdown, excuse me, as an opportunity to engage.
Cough up.
Joe, I'm not often lost for words. Yeah, so I think
that's very true.
Yeah, it's only a cough that'll stop me speaking. So yeah, so I just think it's just really good to have that stand back, objective, informed approach alongside the frontline informed approach.
Yeah, and to give them a voice, really, to give them a voice, to give those organisations, the sort of local organisations, the specialist organisations, who struggle because of lack of funding and central government support, giving them a voice, giving them an opportunity to raise awareness about what they do and why they do it. So yeah, it's about collaboration, about sort of awareness raising, and yeah, totally.
Yeah, and everything that leads to real world impact, which we're kind of very passionate about. Finally, before we go over to audience Q&A, what's next? Tirion, I know you talked about some of the exciting stuff you're kind of like working on. What's next in terms of talks about plans for the future, new research, next event? Give people a bit of insight into what you've got planned. Chris, we'll come to you first.
Oh, okay. So we've got another event coming up, haven't we, Tirion? Maybe that's around. That's something we've got a meeting this afternoon to talk about that one.
We have.
No sooner have we got one finished and we're on to the next one. That's how we roll. Yeah, but our next event is in June. I don't think we fixed the date yet. Have we fixed the date yet?
No.
I think we're doing that this afternoon. I think
that's what we're doing this afternoon, isn't it? So that's going to focus on intersectionality, and we're hoping to get we'll follow with the same format. We know it works, and you know that's for June. So that's something that's on the horizon that we're really looking forward to. That will be exciting. And we've got the work that Tirion's already mentioned around IDVAs that's ongoing, and evaluation working with Surrey County Council around placing IDVAs in hospitals. It's really exciting. I'm so delighted to be involved in that piece of work. Tirion's the lead on that, so I'll not steal her thunder too much. So I've got some research that's been tinkering away in the background for quite some time, which looks at abuse perpetrated via Twitter, and I'm really interested in finding out how abuse via Twitter reflects abuse in the real world, if you like. And it's about sort of space, place, and time, and really interesting to think about that in light of what's happening on social media at the minute around sexual harassment in public places, and you know, how does that reflect in the Twitter world Is it the same? Is it different? These are some of the questions I've been sort of thinking about and very keen to ask in a research context. And I've got a seminar coming up where I'm going to try to put all that together and make it make some sense, which would be fun and interesting.
When is it, Christine?
Oh no, Tirion, don't ask me that. I can't remember. It's in May. I think it's in May sometime.
Sorry, I was trying to give you a plug.
It's in May sometime. Thank you, Tirion.
I'm gonna check it. Keep talking. I'm gonna check my calendar.
Yeah, that's a part of a seminar series that we're running in the School of Law and Social Science, and both the Crime and Justice Research Group run a seminar series. But for this one, I'm presenting for another research group called the Race, Gender and Sexualities Research Group. And has Tirion found the date yet?
No, I'm struggling. It's blinking whatchamacallit. Like, I'm not very good with teams, right? Keep talking amongst yourselves.
We will be while Tirion looks for that, and then we'll give her a minute to talk about her research. But we are going to soon go over to audience Q&A. So what I'd encourage you to do is, if you'd like to ask a question, please either pop your camera on and kind of signal to me that you'd like to ask something, or you can use the raise your hand function. Appreciate that right now, you know, in light of what's in the news recently, that issues like this are sensitive. So we do have signposting resources available, which I am happy to share, and I'll pop those out in an email to everyone afterwards. If anyone does find anything triggering, please do you can pop me a private message, pop either myself, Chris or Tirion, a private message in the chat box. You are welcome to sign off if you'd wish to do so, or you're welcome to kind of like, you know, talk and be involved in the conversation. But we want this to be a safe space where people are able to talk about it. Please bear in mind it is being recorded. But we are happy to kind of signpost afterwards for those that require signposting to resources and support services. So if you are ready to ask a question, you're welcome to pop your camera on, or please pop it in the chat box if you're more comfortable doing so. Tirion, I'll come to you just to finish off.
It's 3 p.m. on the 12th of May.
Thank you. I'll put that on my calendar, Tirion. Thank you.
Yes, do Christine. So yeah, sorry. Do you want me to say anything else?
Yeah. What's next for you? You've already spoken a little bit about it, but just to give us a recap.
I've got sort of lots of fingers and lots of pies, as it were. All in the very early stages, really. So I'm collaborating with De Montfort University. I'm building relationships with the Association of Yacht Managers. I'm on Sheffield's radar, but I guess really I started my fellowship in Parliament 2 weeks ago, so I think at the moment I'm kind of like just trying to get my head around that, really. So apart from what Chris has already spoken about in terms of our evaluations, that's ongoing. And then and Parliament's ongoing, and then just keeping an eye, lots of ideas, and just trying to match the ideas with the funding opportunities, really.
Thank you both. So
that was mysterious.
It's all good. It's all good. Thank you both so much. We are going to open the floor to audience questions now. So if you have a question, please pop it in the chat box. Alternatively, please feel free to pop your camera on and unmute yourself to ask it. So we'll go to our first question. If anyone has one. There you go. We've got one from Natasha come up in the chat box. How best can we follow the research you are doing?
That's a good one.
Oh.
I think I can partially answer that. For me, it's probably Twitter, actually. The Crime and Justice Research Group have a Twitter account. I'll put the handle in the chat in a moment. And quite often we will promote sort of events and maybe research via that route. And how else, Tirion? I don't know.
I'm a bit rubbish on Twitter.
I know.
I don't try.
I don't know that, but I know what. Yeah. Well, how best can we follow the research that you're doing? Come to these events.
Yes, that's the best answer. I mean, if anybody thinks of any good ways we could share the research we're doing, let us know.
Yeah.
I don't tweet very often, and when I do, it tends to be with end results rather than ongoing stuff. So, you know, if I've got a paper or if there's a report or something like that, that's usually the only time I really tweet. And I retweet a lot, but I don't often. Oh, I'm a bit stumped with that one, but thank you though. It's so nice to know that somebody would like to follow me.
Do you pop your Twitter handles in the chat box when you get a sec? Oh, Chris is already on it. Brilliant, fantastic. Thank you. Any more questions from anyone? Anyone who's on screen, you're welcome to ask. Sanchia, we'll come over to you. You're welcome to. There you are. Hi.
Hello. I heard you talk. The panelists talking about intersectionality for future events, if I heard right. And I just wondered what aspects of intersectionality would be explored. I was just curious to find out.
It's still the early. Yeah, go ahead, Tirion.
So we're still very much in the early stages and nothing has been finalized.
Oh, okay.
But certainly we're hoping to have a mum and a daughter come and talk. So the intersectionality of being a mother of somebody who's being abused and a daughter who's being abused. So you see what I mean? We're also hoping very much to try and get a lesbian perspective and a Black perspective, and I'm deliberately being open about the term Black and ethnic minorities because there's so many ways we can go with that, and we need to sort of see what's available, how they could contribute and what would best fit really. But there's definitely going to be an ethnic perspective, if I can say that. And that's as far as we've got. We only thought about it 2 weeks ago, so that's quite good, really.
Oh, right.
I think we're also looking. I think we're looking at it taking place in June, which and hosting at a similar time around the time of Refugee Week and Pride Month. So the intersectionality will kind of link into both of those things, because some of the domestic violence, violence against women and girls is an issue for both refugees and the LGBT
because obviously
community.
Might feel they can't report it because of all sorts of reasons there. So there's probably an underreporting in the refugee community, and how do we ensure that
but also they're not being recognised in the domestic abuse bill at the moment. And
we need to campaign for that. And also I have a concern, just sort of going around the various groups that I'm in. Obviously we've seen the horrific murder of Sarah, haven't we? I think it was Friday or whatever it was, and again just highlighting that even in 2021 we're still not necessarily safe, which is quite sad really. But the sort of things that are going around my networks in terms of the BME community is just that when there's been a number of young Black women who have also had issues walking home and being murdered, but they're not getting the media coverage at the same level. And so I think there's Joy Morgan and Blessing Olusogun, and that's just two names that are kind of and there's the number of petitions that are kind of floating around now because but they're just not getting the same, either from the media or from the feminist movement. And that's why Black feminist movements were set up many, many years ago. So I think, it would be great to sort of explore even within this horrific violence against women and girls, just sort of the way that different groups, as you said, refugee, people from the LGBT community and BME community are even treated and supported within that. So thank you.
Yeah,
thanks.
Thanks,
Sanchia.
Can I just ask you? Sorry, where are you from? When you talk, where are you from? An organisation?
No, well, basically, I work here at LSBU, but I guess the networks where it's coming around from is I'm just involved in a lot of different networks. So political networks. I'm a Labour Party councillor in Barking and Dagenham. So just sort of different networks where it's coming around, sort of Black leadership groups and so on, and that is sort of going around to say that obviously we're fighting that cause of Sarah as well, and we've been lighting our candles and things like that, but we're just concerned that you know, there's been some Black women over the last year or two that have gone missing, and I'm not getting the vigils and the coverage in the same way. And we need to ensure that all women are supported, no matter their background. Like you said, refugee, whether they're LGBT or BME. So we just need to ensure that all women do get that support, and it might not be consistent. And so it would be worth exploring that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sanchia. As we did mention earlier, that event is still in the very early stages, but we do have a meeting this afternoon, so that's all something that we can factor in to our kind of to the planning this afternoon. Does anyone have any more questions? You are welcome to ask.
Hiya, can you hear
Hi
me?
there.
Okay?
We can. Hi there.
Right, I've got a question. By the way, I'm Marie. I'm a student from Liverpool, studying forensic psychology, and I think Tirion mentioned before she was a probation officer.
Yeah.
Because I'm studying as well about the criminal justice system. I was wondering how, when you started working with obviously ex-offenders or offenders, how did your view change from working with them and then victims of like sexual assault and stuff like that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so my practice background is working with perpetrators, I mean, not just perpetrators, but, and then my research is very much focused around giving survivors a voice. And I think one of the big things for me personally was vicarious trauma. And so even though I'd worked for donkey's years with perpetrators and read victim statements and understood, you know, and saw all the graphic detail of all the injuries and how the injuries were obtained, when I actually, what I found was when I actually spoke to the women who were experiencing it, and I was in that space with them, and they were talking that was really much more difficult than I had anticipated. Because I'm pretty resilient and I've been through the system quite a lot, and and I think sort of, yeah, just being in that room with them, and for me it was the body language, and I saw changes in body language and how the speech changed. So sometimes women would start to whisper when they were telling me what was happening, and I think that was something that I really had to sort of take a step back from, really, and work through, and I hadn't anticipated that at all. And I'm much more mindful of that in terms of sort of my own well-being now, and looking after myself, because I got to the point that I could work with perpetrators and it almost wouldn't affect me. But it's a different story, I would say, with survivors. Does that answer your question, Marie?
Yeah, thank you. Also, if you don't mind, I've got another question. I'm part of the BAME community as well, and I'm part of the BAME network students in my uni. And recently we hosted like a similar event as well on sexual assault and like violence against women. And what I've noticed is like a lot of it is within the BAME community as well, and it's not really spoken about. And I think like the previous lady said as well, with the recent event, I was, as a woman as well, because I'm a student, so I spend a lot of my time at the library and then I have to walk home alone. So it was nice to see that she got obviously the justice that was needed, and everyone, we having these conversations now. But also as a Black woman, I can't imagine what it would have been if it was a Black woman, or like, say, we had a conversation with my friends where we were like, what would have happened if it was other than a police officer, but someone from the BAME community or just an immigrant in general, if it would have been the same kind of, you know, coverage, or what kind of language would have been used and stuff like that. So I guess it's more of an observation rather, but it was just to echo the previous lady's point as being a BAME person myself.
Thank you, Marie, for sharing. Chris, Tirion, would you like to come in, or?
You know, just to say absolutely, I observed the same, and I think it's all the more important now that, you know, we hold events that highlight the intersectional nature and the particular issues that are experienced by you know, women of colour and BAME communities. Yeah, absolutely, Marie, and thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Sam, I have a question from Sam. Been to some of your previous events, found them fascinating, informative and emotive. What is your views of recent events this week in the news with regards to the government and police response to domestic violence, stalking, sexism and misogyny?
Can I go first?
You can.
Right, I don't want to spend too long on this, because I think what we need to remember is the people who have died. I think they need to be central to today for me. But I think the police missed an opportunity over the weekend to work collectively with women, to support women, to protect women, and to lead by example how to respect women. And I think they missed that opportunity by not cooperating with the vigil itself at the beginning when they were given that choice, and then clearly, obviously, it messed it all up on Saturday night. And I think, you know, that's part of the bigger structural problem, and there was an opportunity to turn that round or to lead by example, and I think that opportunity was lost. In terms of misogyny, you know, I think it's shocking that misogyny isn't a crime. And the only argument I've heard why it shouldn't be a crime is because women aren't in a minority, which is of course true. But for me, legislation around hate crime is all about equity and equality. And if you look at the Equality Act, then women are mentioned within that. So it just doesn't make any sense to me at all that misogyny isn't recognised in legislation. And I often think that things happen for a reason, and that often coincidences are sort of perfectly timed. And I think the fact that the domestic violence bill is going through Parliament this week, and also the serious, what's it called? The serious crime.
Disorder?
There's another one as well. No. There's another one. Sorry, I should have made a note of it. But there's another one going into court today as well that's looking at demonstrations and stuff.
Oh yes. Mm-hmm.
So I think, you know, that if good comes out of all of this, you know, the time, you know, to get some good out of these dreadful situations is that it's going to stoke more debate in Parliament, and I think there's going to be more scrutiny and discussions about legislation moving forward. I mean, it's a very small win, but, you know, I do think we have to take what we can from it.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I don't really want to dwell too much on events over the weekend, because I think this is about you know, violence against women and girls and you know, femicide. So let's keep the spotlight on that. But I think what we saw a little bit over the weekend was masculinity at play, and masculinity at play in terms of managing a vigil protest, and maybe we need to think about, when we think about prevention, we need to think about masculinity and masculinities, and we need to think about how boys and men are socialized into behaving in particular ways, and how that feeds into violence, and how that feeds into violence against women and girls. So I think I'll just leave it at that, really. And you know, this is about let's keep the focus on the victim here. Let's keep the focus on Sarah and not the police.
Sure. And yeah, and being as strong allies as I can, as a man talking to you both today. You know, I've found that some of the male responses, you know, the hashtag that was trending, not all men, I just found it completely unacceptable, and yeah, baffling. That would be a valid response for so many people. So definitely think, yeah. Anyone else have any questions? We are coming to the end of our time, but we've got time for one or two more, if anyone has any. If there aren't any, I'd like to hand over to Chris and Tirion for parting words. These could be words of wisdom, advice, practical takeaways, whatever you'd like to leave our audience with today. Tirion, should we come to you first?
Oh, I wasn't expecting that, Neil. Oh, words of wisdom. I think a good thing is always to love yourself and be kind to yourself, because if you treat yourself with love and kindness, it's easier to treat others with love and kindness. So be strong, be proud, do your best. And if it's not quite as good as you want it to be, just keep going and you'll get there.
Thank you. Chris? Oh, we have, I think someone's raised their hand. 2 seconds. I think they were legacy hands.
Yeah, sorry, it's me again.
No, did you, no worries. Did you have another question, Marie?
Yeah, so as a student, obviously, I'm trying to, there's that like kind of conversation I'm trying to get started within my university. And what would be your, like, kind of your advice for students in different networks to start raising awareness? Because obviously most of our directors and staff, they're males. So it's, as a woman, you don't really have someone there that can, you know, start those conversations. So how would you say as a student to start this kind of, you know, conversations? I'm repeating myself, but I hope it makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. You need to find your allies. I think you need to find the people who do occupy those more powerful positions, who can support you in whatever action you choose to take. So, and find your voice that way, I think.
I would, you know, sorry, Tirion, over to you first.
No, you go.
No, you go. You go.
Okay, well, I'm just going to, yeah, I mean, definitely find your allies. Don't assume that your allies are only women. Pat Bailey opened one of our events for us. And he's been very supportive around lots of different stuff that we've done. And, you know, slowly, you build a base to get your foundation sorted, to get, you know, and there's a massive appetite for this sort of stuff. I mean, it's been around for a long time. I think it's highlighted this weekend and over the last week. You know, there's been loads of women have been murdered in the last week, you know, and yeah, and I think just start slowly, surely. There is an appetite. Make sure people know about it. Make sure people can opt in. And that's how I'd go about it.
Yeah. And just reflecting on Tirion and I's experience, you know, find those like-minded people and work collaboratively and work together. It makes all the difference to find those like-minded people and to work with them, and all the better if they're in those more powerful positions or have more social capital or whatever than you do, because then they can give that to you. You know, you can thrive together in that regard. I hope that helps, Marie.
Yeah, it does. It's just the fact that I found that a lot of students are quite, not lazy, but with certain topics they don't really want to get engaged in, or for some reason. So it's quite hard to find students that will stick to it, not just for like one day or one session of talks and then that's it, if that makes sense. So yeah, thank you anyway.
Keep at it.
Yeah, do keep at it. I'd say a good point would be to try your student wellbeing team to see if they can get behind you and support you. See if you can link that into staff wellbeing. As an events manager for LSBU, I work across staff well-being, but also touch base with the student well-being team, and think creatively, you know, outside the box about how you can open up those conversations. For the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia a couple of years ago, just to coincide with that, we organised some bystander intervention training, and kind of like the buy-in, that was good. So thinking creatively about how you can get people in. I think people are overwhelmed at the moment where there's so much going on, obviously with lockdown, but so it's taking a bit of extra kind of like thought and getting those right people on board. I think what Chris and Tirion have said about, you know, collaboration and thinking outside the box with that is always a good way. Find your allies, because you never know where you'll find them. Chris, conscious of time, can we come over to you for passing words, please?
Oh, put me on the spot.
On the spot, sorry.
You're hard.
I know, I'll say something. I mean, I think we need to remember that, you know, in the UK, women are killed by men once every 3 days, I think is the statistic that we hear. And there's so much more work to be done here. There's so much more work to be done. It's not all about a criminal justice. It's not always about a criminal justice response. Often we look to the criminal justice system for a response. But, you know, there's more to it than that when we think about prevention, and we go back to that idea about masculinities and boys and men, and also let's take it right back to those specialist organisations who support people living with domestic abuse and save lives, and let's give them a voice and survivors a voice. Let's centre the voice of survivors if we're going to make a difference here. I think that's where we need to look to, really.
Thank you both so much for today. It has been really insightful. It's been a great way to reflect on everything that kind of like you've done, hopefully, and as we look to the future, we will be in touch. Also, Lois, you've got, oh, Lois, just one of those. Great, thank you. We will be in touch regarding future events. And keep an eye on our What's On pages, because we keep those updated with everything we've got going on, and hopefully we'll have more news soon. If you signed up to this event, we will let you know as soon as that date is established, so you can pop that in your diaries. That's all from us. Thanks for attending.
Can I just say thank you, everybody, for coming? I know you're all working, and I know that it's you know, a chunk of time, and I really, really appreciate it. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you.